So we're going to talk about where the rubber meets the road. All right. And now this is an analogy that's really close to my heart because I absolutely adore cars. I always have done. Cars, outside of my love for coaching and my other hobbies. For me, cars is one of them, one of the things that I adore and I love the most. And so I was driving the other day, and I've done a lot of work to my car. It's got more power than it probably should have, for what it is, but it has a lot of power. And as I was driving, I was noticing that really the thing that allows me to use the power within the car, where the rubber is meeting the road, like that's what allows me to use everything that the car is designed for, right? So the aerodynamics, the stability within the suspension, the engine, the power, everything in that car is completely pointless. Where the rubber meets the road is where all of that potential is used, is where all of that potential can happen. Without the rubber meeting the road, all of that potential can't happen. And so then that got me thinking about, well, how does that apply to us as people? How does that apply to us as human beings? Where is it for us that the rubber kind of really meets the road, right? It's like we have, as people, we have goals, we have desires. And for me, that's the power, that's the potential power that we have, just like a car has in its engine. Our power is within our goals, it's within our intention, it's within our desires, which is what creates an individuality. And all of the wishing and the hoping and the wanting for things to change is pointless. It doesn't have, well, it's not pointless, but it doesn't have it has potentiality without actual potential, without actual movement, without actually anything transforming, if we don't really look at where the rubber meets the road for us as people, right? So for me, the question was, where does our focus, or where does your focus, my focus, really need to be in order for all of my power and potential to become transformation, to become alive, to become truth, to become here, to bring it to life, to bring my goals and my desires to life? So two things to consider, right? So there are, where most people in my experience spend their time, and I'm being very direct on this because I want to hit the nail on the head for you guys so we can kind of get right in there. So there are two things to consider. The first thing is like a temporary focus. And this is where most of us focus our energy, where most of us focus, like we're looking for the rubber on the road, right? But where most of us focus isn't actually there at all. We tend to create when we want something, when we're working on our desires, we're working on our goals, our potential, our power, when we're working on those things, it brings up inevitably, it brings up fears, it brings up insecurities, inadequacies. It can bring up things that we would otherwise try and avoid. All right, so fear, resistance, lack of motivation. We have a desire or a goal and we set out with actions, but at some point, we begin to avoid, to procrastinate, or lose momentum, or lose motivation. And what we do then is we try and force it, or we push it, or we kind of say, screw it, I'll feel the fear and do it anyway. And that all has its place, but that can't be relied upon for really having all of our potential and our power come alive. Imagine it like this, right? So I've got all this power in my car and then I decide to cheap out on the cheapest rubber, the cheapest tires that I can. What's going to happen is the wheels are just going to spin and I'm not going to get any traction. That for me is a similar sort of analogy. And when that happens, we tend to blame. We might blame, I haven't got enough time, I haven't got enough energy. We might blame other people. They're not taking enough responsibility. They're not doing what they need to do. We might lack motivation. And that's a really commonly conditioned response. So that's where most of us tend to exist when it comes to where the rubber meets the road. That's where we tend to focus, is on, I'm tired. I haven't got the energy. This feels too scary. This feels too much. I can't do this. This feels too hard. And as I said, that doesn't create permanent change. So let's upgrade those tires, right? Let's upgrade those tires. The tires that I put on my car are the very best that I can buy for my car without having like race car, like literally slick tires on my car. So we want to look at permanent focus so that all of our power and our potential can make contact with the road, with life, and we can use the fullness of our potential and our power, just like I can with my car now, because I have upgraded tires. So it's like, how do we do that for ourselves? How do you do that for yourself? So as a human being, where the rubber really meets the road, and where all of our potential for change and transformation exists, is where we want to be focusing to create lasting change. This is where to focus if we want to have everything we want, our goals, our dreams, our desires come alive. So where the rubber really meets the road for us as people is when fear arrives, when we're at the edges of our comfort zone, or where we've been before, so to speak. When we're at those edges and it feels super uncomfortable, when we're in fear and we're in resistance, instead of avoiding those experiences, instead of placating, avoiding, or doing what we can to distract from those feelings and those experiences, we want to go into them. And that might look like finding out, how are you relating to your own experience? How do you relate to yourself? How do you speak to yourself? You know, when things become challenging, having a deeper understanding of who you are being in that moment of the tire spinning, that's going to either have you be in more contact with the road or continue the tire spinning. So as an example, when you reach the edges of that comfort zone, what do you notice happens inside of you? How do you begin to relate to yourself in your life? What do you begin to avoid? What do you begin to procrastinate on? What becomes more important than the goal? In that moment where there's this decision to make, there's this choice that we have between continuing and not continuing, creating something different or creating the same thing that we always have done. When that choice appears, how are we relating to ourselves? How are you relating to yourself? How are you relating to your life? What becomes more important than using your full power and your potential? Is it safety? Is it comfort? Is it self-preservation? What becomes more important? This is where the power to really change our life exists. When we have a really deep understanding of how we're relating to life, how we relate to our own experience, we then have the choice to recreate how we're experiencing it. So for example, if we're noticing, it's like, oh, I'm avoiding this because I'm scared, then we have the opportunity, we see that, we have an awareness, then we get the opportunity to recreate how we create with fear. We get to drop the judgments we have about how we might look, how we might feel, or what it means about us. We get to recreate ourselves as somebody who is willing to feel those things, to be embarrassed, to get it wrong, to make mistakes, to get messy, to not be perfect. We get to recreate ourselves as that. And when we do that, the quality of the rubber improves. We get better traction with the road. We get to use all of our potential, all of our power. You get to recreate how you relate to yourself in your life. And in doing that, you become somebody who shows up aligned with who they really are. And as a result, you have more peace. You have more power. You have more control. You have a fuller, more enjoyable experience of life. So that's all I have to share on that. As always, I'd love to know your thoughts. If you have questions, that's great. And I'll see you in the next one.